All right, folks, hope you're all doing well. I'm going to try to do video lecture for each date on the syllabus from here on out, at least a short one. I've got good internet now. I'm in my new apartment. Kids got a good schedule, so I should be able to do that. Let's start by taking a quick look at the syllabus together, and then we'll get to our content. So let me share my screen with you here, and you can see it. So put my glasses on, help me see a little better. So you can see I did just send out an announcement. Your next quiz is up. This should be self-grading, although I will double check it. Please email me if you think it didn't do something right. But it should be a little announcement right there. Click on it, takes you right to the quiz. 5 2-point questions, pretty simple, some on capital punishment, some on assisted death. You can see my videos have been sent. I'm also going to send you a link with all my lecture videos, but the last one on assisted death, the PowerPoint that goes with it that you see me going over there, will be helpful for that quiz. Don't forget that we did post a discussion on the 22nd, which you still have until a week or so, into the week to get done. So there's a bit of announcements. Let's take a look at the syllabus, and I'll make sure you can see it as well, so we can see where it's at. And just a few things I wanted to go over just in case you did have any concerns. So I'm going to open it up and then make sure you can see it. Sometimes the screen, when you share it on Zoom, every now and then I can get a background to work on Zoom, and sometimes I can't. So sometimes you just see my apartment, and sometimes you'll see books or something like that. It really depends whether I can get my camera to do the virtual background. It's been weirdly inconsistent about that. Sometime in the not too distant future, hopefully I can invest in a new and better laptop, or at least a laptop with a better camera. So here comes the syllabus. It's coming up a little bit slowly there. And just wanted to go over it, make sure nobody's too anxious, too concerned about anything. And you can always email me if you have any questions as well. So let's take a look at the screen share here. I'm going to give you a new share just to make sure you can actually see the syllabus here. And looks like you can. So this is what you ought to see. And you can see we're down a ways, of course. And here we are after Easter break. Discussion 2 and 3 have been posted. Please get those done. If you have not, I'll be more than happy to obviously give you full credit for 3 and at least partial credit for 2. I did just send out quiz 3, and you can see we have a discussion on Sandel chapter 10. Sandel chapter 9 and 10 are very interesting. I'm going to send you Sandel's lectures from his Harvard course, links to those on those chapters as well, although I'm going to say a little bit about what goes on in those chapters. Then I'll give you some information later on feminist ethics, and then we'll get to death. So you can see quiz 3 posted today. You have till Saturday to do it, so rest of the week. Discussion 4 we posted on the 4th and due probably 6, 7 days later. Same thing with quiz 4, right? Posted on the 6th, you have several days to do it. And same thing with quiz 5 and discussion 5. So the final exam will be due at the end of finals week. And you can see the papers due May 22nd. So whatever the last day of finals actually is, that'll be the final exam. I will double check that. I will post a study guide for your final exam, so that you know quite clearly at least a week before, probably 2 weeks before, exactly what's going to be on it. So nothing will be a surprise. You can't have missed anything. And that's what's coming up, right? So this is the material that has gone on there. And if you look up, you can see that since we went online on the 23rd, right, we had one discussion, we had one video lecture. Now we're making more progress. And that's it. That's all you've got to worry about. Grades should be updated for the most part, so do take a look at those. Okay, so what I want to talk about for just a little bit is, again, your book, Michael Sandel, and chapter 10 is what is assigned. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff in chapter 9 as well. Might make for a interesting paper topic, but we're not going to look at that. We're going to look at chapter 10, and there are a number of interesting things going on in chapter 10. But I'm just going to go over the PowerPoint with you and give you the gist. So let's go back to share the screen again. Make sure we're on that. on the right one. This should be whiteboard for the second, right? Nothing there. And let's go to the course web page. And just a couple of things to remind you. Remember, your paper is due the 22nd, and your paper guidelines, your papers will be turned in on Blackboard. There will be an area over here that says, please, turn in your papers, your final papers. But the guidelines are up and have been up all semester. Right here under paper guidelines, get through the course content. There it is. I will go over the paper with another little video and see if you have any questions. Again, at least a couple of weeks before it's due, probably next week, actually. So that's there. And the PowerPoint for today, let's take a look at that. The PowerPoint for today is a really simple one, and it only has a few things on it. We just need a few key concepts. Incidentally, these PowerPoints here are what you need for your quiz: assisted death and crime and punishment. Those are the two that you need. And today, we'll get to feminism and ethics next video lecture. But today, we're going to talk about the right versus the good. And this is pretty much what chapter 10 is about. So let's pull this up. Again, I'll make sure the screen is on there. And we'll tie in some ideas, okay? I'm going to go over it, look at it, make sure the PowerPoint looks right, and then we'll start digging into it. Slowly but surely, yeah. All right, now I'm going to put that up there. And again, I'm going to make sure that you can see the actual bits here. Stop share for a second and share screen again. Hopefully you can see the PowerPoint. I'll double check it, of course. And gosh, it's not letting me get to what I need to get to here. So there we go. Slowly but surely maneuvering around here. This should work. So, all right, here are the concepts that we need to discuss. And Sandel in chapter 10 wants to talk about a long history of discussing two different conceptions in moral and political philosophy: the right versus the good. The right versus the good. Now, what he means by this is the right is understood as the complete set of rights and freedoms that a fair society should grant to all its members, like free speech or a right to an education or trial by attorney or jury of your peers or freedom of assembly, any of those things. So rights have to do with the liberties and the exercises of individuals. And what are they doing? What are they allowed to do? What are they permitted to do? What needs to be protected? The good is something different. According to Sandel, and he's just here following a long line of political philosophers, the good is a conception of the purpose, the aim, the meaning, the ultimate value, the ultimate purpose or goal of human life, and the ultimate values that should govern our lives. For example, religious beliefs. God created us to bear his image in the world and love each other or something like that. That's a conception of the good. Doesn't have to be religious, but religions are sort of textbook examples. So next slide, he outlines a theory you should be familiar with. Well, not necessarily at this point, but we went over it a while back, but a lot's happened. Political liberalism. And now the word liberal does not necessarily relate to our terms. We have conservative liberals in our politics. Throw that out or bracket it. That is not necessarily what's going on here, right? So in political liberalism, this is the kind of thing that is it comes out of social contract theory. So political liberalism, the purpose of law and government is to protect rights and freedoms. That is what government is for. Okay? That is what government is for. And that's why we have governments. This is what government is meant to do. And if it's not doing that, it's not living up to its end of the bargain. Okay? Beyond rights and freedoms, a just society should promote principle of liberty. Principle of liberty is something you found in John Stuart Mill, and libertarians love it. It means this: each person is free to live as they see fit and to believe and value what they choose. You can all do whatever you want with one exception. provided they don't infringe upon the rights and freedoms of other individuals. And that usually is taken to mean you can't commit forced theft or fraud against other people. But anything else, you do you. Well, that's what it means. So on this view, you take 1 and 2 together. The government's job is not to tell you what's good or bad in some ultimate sense, just to legislate what rights and freedoms you have, and then to allow you as much liberty, personal liberty as possible. The just society can't legislate the good. And this, in fact, is why we have separation of church and state, so that people can have their private religious conscience, but also be required to appreciate the public good. Okay, and so a just society, for example, should remain neutral on major moral issues, focusing only on what rights people have. So take, for example, 2 positions Sandel discussed in this chapter: same-sex marriage and abortion. The politically liberal ideal is to refrain from deciding whether it's ultimately morally good or bad to permit abortions and same-sex marriages, but merely discuss whether or not having an abortion or getting a same-sex marriage, permitting a same-sex marriage, is in line with basic rights and freedoms, in particular the principle of liberty. And it doesn't judge whether these things are good or bad. That's private. That's up to the individual's private conscience. The idea here is no. The society just basically says it's not up to us to decide that. It's not up to us to determine that. It is only up to us to decide whether people have a right to behave this way on a broader social framework. Sandel's objection is that can't be. If you say that same-sex marriage is permissible or abortion is permissible, you are saying that you're not entirely neutral. We don't say murder or torture is permissible. I tortured my neighbor because he built on my property or something. That's not allowed because it's grotesquely immoral. And if you're saying, for example, abortion is permissible, a woman can have an abortion at a certain stage in the pregnancy at least, you are saying whatever else it is, abortion isn't murder. And that's not neutral. That is Sandel's claim. So he actually claims that the kind of neutrality that political liberals aspire to isn't possible. Okay, so that's one of his claims. And it's based on another claim. He thinks the idea that we can each just kind of do our own thing, and as long as we don't commit forced theft and fraud against other individuals, we don't murder them, we don't beat them up, we don't steal from them, everything is fine, depends on a premise that Sandel finds even more suspect than the political neutrality. So we'll take a look at that. Sandel calls it moral individualism. And here's how it plays. I am only morally accountable for obligations and situations that I choose to commit myself to. And that is, there's no such thing as collective responsibility. Very interesting here. Right? Well, on the one hand, collective responsibility is something we discussed when we discussed, I'm going to fix something here real quick. For the purposes, by the way, of this PowerPoint, ignore utilitarianism. Although this is a good definition to have in your books, so but it's not going to be part of our discussion. I must have had it for some point, and it's not necessary today. So collective responsibility is something sometimes used in affirmative action discussions. You can see it back in chapter 7 of Sandel. But the collective responsibility is this, that we can have a duty or obligation based solely upon our membership in a group. And there's one case, as I mentioned back when we discussed that example, that is just kind of silly. And there is another case that makes more sense. So case number 1, if my grandfather murdered a man in 1946, suppose then the police come, a little typo there we'll fix, the police come and arrest me for that crime. That would clearly be unfair. My grandfather committed the murder and not me. Okay, that's where I'm an individual. My grandfather is a different individual. I can't be held accountable for his crimes. And we might think moral individualism, this view again right here. I am only morally accountable for obligations and situations that I choose to commit myself to. That seems to be right when you look at case 1. Obviously, if my grandfather committed a murder in 1946, which he did not, I assure you, or at least not to my knowledge, if that is the case, I can't be arrested for that murder. That would be absurd. Case number 2, however, is different. Suppose that in 1946, my grandfather didn't commit a murder, right? He just stole $1 million, and now I'm a rich guy. Unfortunately, this is a fictitious story. on part of this. Now, I find out that some guy living in terrible poverty is the grandson of the man my father stole that money from. It does seem I'm morally obligated to give him some of the money. I didn't steal it. I didn't even know it was stolen. But suppose I now find this out. I am a recipient of the benefits of my grandfather. I benefited from my grandfather's terrible actions. And now I'm in a position to rectify that by somebody who is disadvantaged by my grandfather's action. And that leads us into another view. Sandel says political liberalism is built too strongly on the notion that we are all radical individuals and we're on our own here. And, it dismisses notions of community. And Sandel's alternative theory is actually highly indebted to Aristotle. Now, there's some stuff about Aristotle here that I'm not presently going to mention. I may have a video on Aristotle for you later in the week. In fact, I think I probably will. It'll be a little bit of a summary, but it'll play in nicely to some of the themes we're now discussing. So more on Aristotle again to come. But if you were a communitarian, Aristotle was the classic example here. You believe that there actually is a common good and there is a purpose to society and that we're all part of a broader community. Okay. And there's a number of things here you should jot down and look at, but let's look at a passage from Sandel here. It's either in chapter 9 or chapter 10. I'll find it. And I'm going to read you the passage. Chapter 9 is a great read. I will send you 2 lectures by Sandel, one on chapter 9 and one on chapter 10. It'll be quite helpful. Again, how Aristotle fits into this, I might add in a little bit of a moment, but that is probably still to come. Bear with me. I think it is in chapter 10, so I'll tell you what pages as well. It would be well worth reading if you get to it. It could also be in chapter 9, so bear with me. Nope, I think it is in chapter 10. And inequality, solidarity. Oh, gosh darn it. It might actually be in chapter 9. What are you going to do? Aristotle, by the way, is chapter 8 of Sandel's book. You want to go back to Aristotle and what's going on here with communitarianism. That's up to you, of course. Okay, so this is Moral Individualism, page 212 and 213. I'm going to read a little bit of that and a little bit of about 10 pages later. So this is what moral individualism is. So this is when he's discussing should, say, the modern United States government apologize for slavery or the genocide of the Native Americans and make some sort of amends. And he's debating that. And so he says there's a principled objection saying that no, the modern United States shouldn't apologize for these past sins, and here's how it goes. The principled objection to official apologies is not easy to dismiss. It rests on the notion that we are responsible only for what we do ourselves. Got my pen out to highlight the important passages here. That we are responsible only for what we do ourselves. Okay. Oh, only for what we ourselves do. Not for the actions of other people or for any events beyond our control. Microphone's not our friend right there. There we go. All right, so not events beyond our control. So we are not answerable for the sins of our parents or our grandparents or our compatriots. Okay. For the moral individualist, skipping a few lines on page 213, for the moral individualist to be free is to be subject only to obligations I voluntarily incur. Whatever I owe others, I owe by virtue of some act of consent, a choice or a promise or an agreement that I've made, be it tacit, implied, or explicit. The notions that my responsibilities are limited to the ones I take upon myself can be quite liberating. It assumes that we are, as moral agents, free and independent selves, unbound by prior moral ties, capable of choosing our purposes for ourselves, not custom or tradition or inherited status, but the free choice of each individual is the source of the only moral obligations that constrain us. This brings in the whole notion of what does it mean to be free And is freedom really true? I will actually send you out a video, one of which is from me, on the question of free will as a side note to this, so that you know what you're looking for. Okay, so moral individualism for Sandel is the whole basis of this. I'm going to be neutral. I'm not going to adjudicate between competing conceptions of the good. I just care about the principle of liberty and basic rights. And that's what liberalism is built on. I happen to be attracted to political liberalism myself. I think it's a good theory. So Sandel is challenging me on a personal level here. But what's he arguing? I'm going to switch up my microphone there. Might be a little better on that side. So, okay, what's the guy arguing? He is arguing basically that we are not genuinely free and independent in the way that the individualist thinks. We're constrained and we're bound by our connections. And I will give you 2 examples of that away from the PowerPoint in a moment. But let's skip ahead a little bit in chapter 9 of Sandel. And this section is called Storytelling Beings, and it refers to the work of a great Scottish philosopher who came years taught at the University of Notre Dame. I believe he's still alive and in his 90s now. Alasdair MacIntyre. And this is his book, After Virtue, fantastic book. And I wrote my master's thesis on Alasdair MacIntyre, in fact. And here's what he says. Sandel, talking about MacIntyre, on page 221, chapter 9. Alasdair MacIntyre offers a powerful answer to this question. Now, what question is that? Or are we communal or individual? In his book, After Virtue, he gives an account of the way we, as moral agents, arrive at our purposes and ends. As an alternative to the voluntarist conception of the person, that will be free, radically free and independent selves, MacIntyre advances a narrative conception. Human beings are narrative, are storytelling beings. Human beings, I'll underline that, are storytelling beings. We live our lives as narrative quest. I can only answer the question, what am I to do? If I can answer the prior question of which story or stories do I find myself a part? Of which story or stories do I find myself a part? All lived narratives, MacIntyre observes, have a certain teleological, remember teleology from earlier in the semester, everything has a purpose, a goal. A teleological character. This does not mean they have a fixed purpose or end laid down by some external authority like the Lord God. Teleology and unpredictability coexist, like characters in a fictional narrative. We do not know what will happen next. But nonetheless, our lives have a certain form which projects itself towards our future. To live a life is to enact a narrative quest that aspires to a certain unity or coherence. It's my dog in the background. Certain unity or coherence. When confronted with competing paths, I try to figure out which path will best make sense of my life as a whole and of the things I care about. Interesting, right? And then he gives you a big quote from MacIntyre that's extremely important. So I'm going to read it twice. This is right in the middle, towards the bottom, but in the middle of 222. We all approach our circumstances as bearers of a particular social identity. I am someone's son or daughter, someone's cousin or uncle. I am a citizen of this or that city, a member of this or that guild or profession. I belong to this clan, that tribe, this nation. Hence, what is good for me has to be the good for one who inhabits these roles. As such, I inherit from the past of my family, my city, my tribe, my nation, a variety of debts, inheritances, rightful expectations, and obligations. These constitute the given of my life, my moral starting point. This is in part what gives my life its own moral particularity. So let's read that again, and then I'm going to offer up 2 contrasts. We all approach our own circumstances as bearers of a particular social identity. I am someone's son or daughter, someone's cousin or uncle. I'm a citizen of this or that city, a member of this or that guild or profession. I belong to this clan, that tribe, this nation. Hence, what is good for me has to be good for one who inhabits these roles. As such, I inherit from the past of my family, my city, my tribe, my nation, a variety of debts, inheritances, rightful expectations, and obligations. These constitute the given of my life. They are my moral starting point. This is in part what gives my life its own moral particularity. So let me see if I can break this down. That is the essence of communitarianism for MacIntyre, and let me contrast it in a couple of ways. So let me sum up here. In the West, for a long time, but at least the last few hundred years, most definitely, probably further back than that. This probably goes back to ancient Greece and medieval thought and a number of different things. But in the West, we primarily think of ourselves as individuals first. I am a particular individual. If you've ever read Descartes' Meditations, in any of your philosophy classes, you can see how this comes about, right? In Descartes' Meditations, Descartes tries to figure out, how do I know anything outside my head exists? Are there other people? Is the world real? Is it all a dream? And so on. And the reason that he can do it this way is he assumes we started here. I am a unique, particular individual, quite special and quite separate. And my relationships to others come after my individuality. I am first and foremost, and perhaps all by myself, an individual, and relationships are secondary, contractual affairs. This is a unique way of looking at it in world history. Most ancient peoples, and as far as we can tell, prehistoric, meaning before civilization, before agriculture, before writing, did not think of it that way. They thought of themselves much closer to the quote I just read from MacIntyre, part of the group, inhabiting a mixture of social roles that have preordained setups for them. So that's a more standard human way of thinking. Our radical individualistic focus is ours, okay? And political liberalism does assume it. Now, I, for one, think there are benefits to our individualism and political liberalism, but there are limits too. And most other philosophical traditions have challenged it. I'll just give you one. In many ways, one of my favorite philosophical traditions is the Chinese tradition of Confucianism. Some of you might know something about it, others may not. Confucius is a truly fascinating guy, and he has this notion of an individual that's radically different from ours, and here's how. There is no such thing as an individual in isolation. You cannot be human by yourself. In Confucianism, we can only be human together, and that is because our relationships create us. We are not a unique individual apart from others. We are an individual only because and through our relationships with others. I am who I am because I was born in a particular time and place, in a particular community. I was raised by particular parents. I've had particular friends. I played on particular teams. I went to particular schools. I have had particular relationships. Those relationships are not peripheral to me, as the Western tradition has too often seemed to treat it. Those relationships are me. An individual just is a web of relationships. Aristotle thinks something somewhat similar, as we'll see later when we talk more Aristotle. This is extremely important for the next topic we're going to get to, which is feminism and ethics. A lot of feminist thinkers in philosophy have challenged the predominant notions of political liberalism and moral individualism on a lot of the grounds that people like MacIntyre and even ancient writers like Aristotle have suggested. So what we're going to do, I'm going to send you some videos on a few more of these concepts that break it down a little bit more. Quiz is up. You'll hear from me again soon. Let's take another look at the syllabus here and share the screen, go back to the syllabus, and there we go. So again, let's cross out this here if we can and say, look, we've done this much. And I just passed out quiz 3 via an announcement. I just talked about Sandel 10. Yeah, a little bit of Sandel chapter 9. They go together quite nicely. I'm going to send you quite a few more videos. And sometime in here, you'll get another video from me about feminism and feminist ethics, either the first or the fourth, somewhere in that zone. And you'll probably get one before then about Aristotle. And I'll send you some other videos. But for now, just, hit back these two discussions if you haven't got them yet. Take a look at quiz 3. If you get a chance, read Sandel chapter 9 and 10, but I am going to send you videos of Sandel's classes talking about those things. And we will be in touch soon. Be safe. be well, take care of yourselves, and you know, as far as school is concerned, do the best you can, and we will talk again soon.